Good morning, students. It is one of the lessons for class 12 English from Flamingo. It is the lesson Indigo written by Louis Fisher, and you have already learned about this very American born journalist who had served in British Army and later he became a prominent writer. The Life of Mahatma Gandhi he wrote, in which this very indigo excerpt has been taken. What did happen after the victory that he got in the court of Champaran, that he was released from the court? Rajendra Prasad, Brij Kishore Babu, Maulana Mazharul Haq and several other prominent lawyers arrived from Patna. They conferred with Gandhi what they would do if he was sentenced to prison. Gandhi asked them. The senior lawyer replied they had come to advise and help him. If he went to jail, there would be nobody to advise and they would go home. Means it was the most disappointing condition for all these men, that if there was no mentor like Gandhi, what they would do. Gandhi asked, what about the injustice done to the sharecroppers? Gandhi demanded. The lawyers withdrew to consult. Rajendra Prasad has recorded the upshot of their consultations. Really, it was his courage. They thought amongst themselves that Gandhi was totally a stranger. He had come from outside, yet he was prepared to go to prison for the sake of the peasants of Bihar. And if they, on the other hand, being not only residents of these adjoining districts, but also those who claimed to have served these peasants should go home, it would be a shameful desertion. It is something that is so shameful that they could never forget in their life. They accordingly went back to Gandhi and told him they were ready to follow him into jail. This was an agreement. This was a decision taken by the lawyers. The Battle of Champaran is known. Gandhi exclaimed that he had won the Battle of Champaran. Then he took a piece of paper and divided the group into pairs and put down the order in which each pair was to court arrest. Several days later, Gandhi received a written communication from the magistrate in which he informed that Lieutenant Governor of the province had ordered the case to be dropped. It was a victory, first step. Civil disobedience had triumphed on the first time in modern India, Gandhi announced. Gandhi and the lawyers now proceeded to conduct a far-flung inquiry, means everywhere, to know about the grievances of the farmers. Dispositions about 10,000 peasants were written down. All the information that they got and notes were made and other evidences, documents were collected. It was the far area, and this was the strong protest against the landlords. In June, Gandhiji was summoned, called to Sir Edward Gate, the Lieutenant Governor. Who was Sir Edward Gate, Albert Gate? He was an administrator in the Indian Civil Service who rose to serve as Lieutenant Governor of the Bihar and Odisha province in the Bengal Presidency of India, British India. He held that office for the years 1915 to 1920. Then Gandhi just met with the leading associates and again led detailed plans for civil disobedience if he should not return. Gandhiji had 4 protracted interviews with Lieutenant Governor. As a result, he appointed an official commission of inquiry into the Indian indigo sharecroppers. What was their situation? The commission consisted of landlords, government officials, and Gandhi as the sole representative of the peasants. It was a great achievement. Gandhi remained in Champaran for an initial period of 7 months without break, and then again for several other short visits he came. The visit undertaken casually on the entreaty of an unlettered peasant, Rajkumar Shukla. Why? Because he expected him to stay for a few days and the problem would be solved. But it took almost a year of Gandhi's life. The official inquiry assembled a crushing mountain of evidence against the big planters. When they saw that it is in principle it is to make refunds to the peasants, but how much must they pay? They asked Gandhi. Means now the official inquiry realized that the demand of the peasants were genuine. They thought he would demand repayment in full of the money which they had illegally and deceitfully extorted from the sharecroppers. Means the landlords, the British officials thought. But he asked only 50%. There he seemed adamant. Who writes this statement? The most respectable person, J.Z. Hawes. Who was he? He was a British missionary in Champaran. He observed the entire episode at a very close range, thinking probably that he would not give way. The representative of the planters offered to refund to the extent of 25%. Really, it was a great amazement. Mr. Gandhi took him at his word. Why? Because it was the breaking of the deadlock. This settlement was adopted unanimously by all, without question, by the commission also. Gandhi explained that the amount of the refund was less important. Why? Because it was the first time in British India that the British officers and the officials had to just surrender before the Indians, and it was a matter of their prestige, but they had surrendered. Therefore, as far as the peasants were concerned, the planters had behaved as lords above of the law. Means these British and landlords just considered themselves above the law. Now the peasants saw that he had rights and defenders. Peasants could understand that they had Gandhi, who can fight against the injustice. He learned courage. Events justified Gandhiji's position. Within a few years, what did happen? The British planters left their estates, which reverted to the peasants. Indigo sharecropping disappeared. That went forever. Gandhi never contented himself with large political or economic solutions. He saw the cultural and social backwardness in that very Champaran villages, and he wanted to do something for that. He called Mahadev Desai and Narhari Parikh, two young men who had just joined Gandhiji as disciples, and their wives volunteered, worked themselves for the work. Several more came from Bombay, Pune, and other distant parts of the land. Devdas, who was the Gandhiji's youngest son, also arrived from ashram, and so did Mrs. Gandhi. Here, primary schools were opened in 6 villages. Kasturba taught the ashram rules on personal cleanliness and community sanitation. Means she was the woman who taught them about cleanliness and how to just make latrines, etc. for them. Now, what did happen? Health conditions were very miserable, very sad. Gandhi got a doctor to volunteer his services for 6 months. Three medicines were available. What were that? Castor oil. When there had sore throat or rough means tongue was while coated quinine and sulfur ointment. Anybody who showed a coated tongue was given a dose of castor oil. Anybody with malaria fever received quinine plus castor oil, and anybody with skin eruptions received ointment plus castor oil. So you must remember these medicines that were prescribed. Gandhiji noticed the filthy state of women's clothes. He asked Kasturba to talk to them about their filthy condition. There is one event that is unforgettable. There was a woman, she said she had only one sari and there was no other. During his long stay in Champaran, Gandhiji kept a long distance watch on the ashram. He sent regular instructions by letter and asked for financial accounts so that he could regulate the events. Once he wrote to the residents what it was about. It was about the old latrine ditch that was dug, and new one was dug. Otherwise, the old ones would just begin to smell so foul. So there he did the work on health and education as well as the hygienic condition. The Champaran episode was a turning point in Gandhi's life. What he did, he explained. It was a very ordinary thing. He declared that the British could not order him about in his own country. He had a strong conviction. But Champaran did not begin as an act of defiance. It grew out of an attempt to alleviate means to lessen the distress of large numbers of poor peasants. This was very special, Gandhi's pattern. His politics was intertwined, mingled with practical day-to-day problems of the millions. What is day-to-day problems? About food, cleanliness, clothes, and shelter. He was education. His was not a loyalty to abstraction. He did not believe in perfection. It was a loyalty faith to living human beings. In everything Gandhi did. Moreover, he tried to mold a new free Indian who could stand on his own feet, as it is said, Atmanirbhar Bharat, self-dependent India, thus make India free. He wanted like this. Early in the Champaran actions, Charles Freer Andrews, the English pacifist, he had come. Charles Freer Andrews. Who was he? English pacifist, who had become a devoted follower of the Mahatma Gandhi. He came to wish Gandhiji farewell before going on a tour of duty to the Fiji Islands. Gandhiji, lawyer friends, thought it would be good that if Andrews stay in Champaran and help them, but Gandhiji refused. He refused. He strongly opposed it. What did he say? If you think that in this unequal fight with the British, the Englishman would be on our side and can help us, this shows the weakness of the Indian's heart. The cause is just, and Indians must believe in themselves that they would win the battle. Really, it was. And this idea really propped in Mr. Andrews because he happened to be an Englishman. He had read their minds correctly, Rajendra Prasad commented. we had no reply. Gandhiji in this way taught everyone, every Indian, a lesson in self-reliance, as it is now said by the Prime Minister. He had read their minds, and self-reliance, Indian independence, and help to sharecroppers were all bound together. So I think now whatever questions will come, you can understand and write it so perfectly. Thank you, children.